All right, so Tigers. So last week they lose Riley Green, they lose Eduardo Rodriguez, they lose Matt Vierling, and it feels like our worst fears realized in that a team with very little margin for error then goes to Chicago and scores 3 runs in 3 games. And this is a perilous time. Their next 3 series, all against National League teams, 2 of them are first-place teams. They start with Philly, then they got Arizona and Atlanta. And with the injuries they have and the way that they've been playing, this feels like a very perilous time for our Tigers. Like, this could be where the fairy tale ends.
Yeah, and that's why this weekend was so disappointing, because you knew what was coming up next. Right? I don't think any of us really genuinely believed that this was going to be a Cinderella team. Now, maybe they still – I don't. Baseball's a long season, right?
And this division's so bad.
Right. Maybe they get hot again, but when you're looking at the schedule coming up, you're saying, man, these 3 games against Chicago, that could put us in a good spot to where we can weather some bad games against some of these better teams. But to go out there and just lay a stinker all weekend and I think it was one of 22 hitting with scores or runners in scoring position. Game 2 Saturday, right? The 2 runs that Chicago scored are both on wild pitches. Even yesterday, Alex Lang, who has been phenomenal all season, right, comes in a tie game and lets up a grand slam. It's just like it's just so disappointing, because you figure, man, we know they're having some tough games, but even if they win a couple, we don't need them to win every single series, but they're still going to be right there, 2 games back, 3 games back. This seems like, though, now where we're at now, in a week from now, in a week and a half or 2 weeks from now, that 3.5 games back could look like 9, could look like 10. And that's where you start to say, man, we could have gotten a couple in Chicago, right? You feel like it's going to start a little bit of a free fall. And look, I don't know if I can necessarily say that I'm mad or I'm disappointed, right? Because there's still 3.5 games out at this point of the season. Nobody expected this. Nobody expected them to be, even in a bad division, you didn't expect them to be a second-place team at this point of the year. So I still think they have overachieved a little bit, but they're just one of those teams that it's just frustrating because you don't see the consistency.
Yeah, and when you're not scoring, it's just pretty much boring.
Scoring, but barely even hitting.
Yeah.
I mean, barely even getting on base.
I mean, Torque hit a bomb yesterday, which accounted for all their offense. And with the guys out, we always talk about players that can give you more, and he's one of them. But they're pretty desperate. They desperately need him to step up. And Javi Baez has obviously reverted back to being a disappointment here. And I was holding out hope that they could make it to the middle of this month, and they got 7 games in 10 days against the Twins. And it felt like if they were still within striking distance, we could have a little fun with being in a division hunt. But you're right. This 3.5 game deficit feels like it could become 9 with the series in Philly and then 2 first-place teams coming in Arizona and Atlanta. And then they're in the taking on the Twins where they need to win every game. Now, will Riley Green be back? Doesn't sound like Eduardo Rodriguez will be close. So,
yeah.
I mean, you start thinking in the next 9 days, do they actually go call up Justin Henry Malloy, who hit a home run on Saturday? Do they Kerry Carpenter's off to a slow start on his return from injury? He's 4 for 27 in his rehab stint down in Toledo. Colt Keith had a decent weekend again with Erie. He seems to be their most potent hitter, but it's at the AA level. I mean, those moves are kind of emergency break glass, even though I think most fans would rather see all 3 of them than see Jonathan Scope paraded out there, or Nick Maton, who's went 1 for 10, I think, in the 3 games this weekend. So I get it, but those are moves that are probably more steeped in desperation, because organizations, they don't like to call guys up before they're ready.
Right.
I just don't know where the offense is going to come from. The idea of treading water until Riley Green and Eduardo Rodriguez back, not even gain, but can they just stay where they are? 3.5 games back going into that Minnesota series on June 15th would be a huge success. considering in context.
Yeah, right.
In context.
But that's the problem, is that we don't see a path, right? Because it's just, like you mentioned, the injuries already. You mentioned guys that are getting into slumps again, Javi Baez, right?
Yep.
You don't really see a path to what they did, a month ago when they swept the Mets and when they took 3 out of 4 from St. Louis, or 2 out of 3 from St. Louis. You don't see really a path to them doing that again, because they're missing some of their best players right now. And we don't know when they're going to be back. So unfortunately, we're probably going to be in a couple of weeks where it's like, all right, bring the young bucks up, right? Tarek Skubal, I know he's going through his stint down there in, I think, single A, and saw he pitched really well this weekend. Is he a guy that they can hope for, another young guy that showed a lot of promise that this team might need? I just don't know, but I also don't want to get my hopes up. I don't want to get my hopes up, because every time you get your hopes up, this happens. This weekend happens.
Think about what they've lost, too. Riley Green, when he got hurt, was the best hitter I think it was in the American League. I don't think it was all baseball. He was the best hitter in the American League for the month of May. Eduardo Rodriguez spent 6 or 7 starts being the best starter in Major League Baseball, which is, probably not. I think it's a highly unsustainable pace for Rodriguez, but Riley Green might be coming into his own, and you lose a great starting arm, a guy who'd been acting like a great starting arm, and a guy who'd been acting like one of the best young hitters in the league. That's a lot, man. That's a lot to try and absorb. And we're not surprised that they couldn't over the weekend, but yeah, this is a treacherous time. Treacherous time.